Hey everyone, this is John.
This is Hector.
And our discussion of the Watchmen continues now with Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 starts with this character, and I said in the previous show we'd talk more about the movie, but this character, neither of these two characters are in the film, and I think is better off for it. You have this newsstand owner, and this kid who comes to his newsstand just to read issues of... Oh God, what's it called? What's the graphic novel called that he's reading? Now it's escaping me.
It's Curse of the Black
Freighter.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah, is that it? Okay, but
that's what we're calling Freighter.
This is something that pops up in quite a few issues. You get this newsstand owner who I guess is supposed to be this function of reflecting the feelings or the tension of the general population. Through this character, and also illustrating the direction the world is going in through these excerpts of Curse of the Black Freighter. And this is one thing, as I was reading the comment, I think I understand the function of this, of what Mr. Alan Miller is going for when he's writing this. What's that?
Alan Moore.
Alan Moore, sorry, not Alan Miller, excuse me. See, this is how much of a novice I am to this sort of thing. So I'm really just talking out of my ass here. I'm glad this didn't show up in the film, because every time these sort of sections come up, I was like, oh great, more of this. This really didn't do it for me.
I'm not going to lie, the first time I read it, I was like, where's the story? And
right, where are the characters that I like? Who are these two?
It's a parallel to each of the characters themselves. Like, as you kind of read this, it's kind of an introduction to this chapter. We're now going to...
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, this chapter is very much a Dr. Manhattan driven. Actually, the next couple are very Dr. Manhattan.
Well, and you know, I think the function of having these Curse of the Black Freighter panels throughout this is to really illustrate that all of these characters are on a path directly to destruction, and there's nothing they can really do to get off of that. Like, no matter what they try to do to escape their fate, it's all leading them toward the same end. I just think that, especially in the later issues, it all comes on very strong.
Right.
But
what's really worth mentioning now is that the news vendor, he's kind of giving us the exposition of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Like, we're finding out, like, it's 1985. It's still the Cold War between Russia and the United States. And nuclear war is something that is very...
Yeah, it's an imminent threat.
Exactly. So they're kind of like building up to that.
Yeah, whereas, and in a lot of that, again, one of the reasons that Dr. Manhattan is a prominent character throughout this issue is that a lot of the reasons for that escalating nuclear war threat is because Superman exists and he's American, or is it God exists and he's American?
Yeah, whatever they're looking at it, that's what's happening.
And the only way to avoid certain destruction is to assure mutually assured destruction.
Yes, and we're in like more on that later on, actually, in this episode, because it comes up a lot.
Yeah,
but we kind of open up with an unintended threesome.
Yeah, things are getting romantic for Laurie and Dr. Manhattan. John, should we call him John?
He's John, yeah. Well, yeah, he's John.
This is a very personal thing that's going on here. Or is it impersonal for him?
Because he doesn't even go by it. Like, he really doesn't go by anything. He's kind of this all-embodied thing.
Yeah, and he's in the room with Laurie, and he kind of like surprises her with a three-way with himself, which startles her, and to the point where she can't really cope with the situation. Yeah. He thinks he's doing something nice, but his lack of connection is becoming very apparent with her because he's also in the other room working. Yes.
That's the thing that aggravates her the most is... You couldn't stop what you're doing. You're doing things you think I like instead of knowing what I like.
Yeah, yeah. And then following their confrontation where she throws something at him and then he just rebuilds it, you get her storming out, also intercut with this other character who we have seen in a panel before.
Yes.
She was the woman with him at the first meeting and the last meeting of the Crime Busters. She was standing right next to him. She is older now, as you know, as people do, and she's been diagnosed with cancer, which is something that is going to come up. But all of that is intercut with Laurie basically going to visit Dan Dryberg.
Yes. They met for the first time in years at a restaurant. Like, she called him up after Rorschach came up. It was like, hey, I haven't talked to him in a while. Let me go give him a call and do dinner.
It might be a good time to take a sidebar and talk about these two characters and their interactions with each other, because they're both like kind of pathetic and they lean heavily on each other. I really like the depiction of him. I think he was very much like aged down in the film, because in this he's like in his 40s.
Yes.
He's a bit washed up. He's out of shape. She was certainly aged down in the movie, because she's supposed to be in her mid 30s, and
she's pushing 40 in this.
Yeah. And certainly nowhere near the end of her life.
Yeah.
But certainly at a point where
a midlife crisis would hit both of them.
Right.
And they're both representing something different. She's in that broken state because of him, because of John. She's been with him since she was 17, so it's been a 20-plus year type of relationship. She knows nothing else outside, them living in, with the government and working with him. Whereas I feel like Dan he longs to be that superhero again. Hence why him and Hollis always have these talks about kind of the reminiscence,
Yeah, and I think he wants someone to depend on him.
Yes.
Like he wants to be a stabilizing influence in someone's life.
Which is once again with him and Hollis.
Yep. So, and as Laurie and Dan are having this talk about John and the confrontation they just had, you get John, Dr. Manhattan, getting ready to go see some people. And you know that because he's putting clothes on.
Yes. When he puts clothes on, it's important.
Yep. And this is where you see him get all dressed up. He's going for a TV interview while Dan and Laurie are going out to hit the town. Actually, I think they're going out to see Hollis. Correct?
They're going to go see Hollis.
Right.
Once again, two things going on at the same time. We have John going into this televised interview.
Where he's about to get ambushed, as are Laurie and Dan.
Yeah, because they're going to be attacked by a gang of people, which they seem to be excited about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they both might be a little washed up and out of shape, but they still kicked some ass.
Yes, they are some serious ass kickers. They probably did some damage in their primes. But it's a really fun set of pages, because we talked about the sort of grid-like fashion the panels are lined up. Once this action starts to pick up, John gets into the movie studio, they're going into the dark alley, you can definitely see the shift in how the panels are laid out. It's a much more sort of speedy way. The panels start to race together.
Yes. Because
the action's picking up. And of course the action with Dan and Laurie is very direct. It's a physical confrontation, whereas John, Dr. Manhattan, is being confronted with his old flame, his old girlfriend, who has cancer. And the implication being hey, you've known a couple of people and they've all gotten or died from cancer. Is it you that's doing this?
There's a panel where they mention Janie.
Yeah, Janie.
And he... it's one of the only times where besides his little rage panel, the only time where you see him actually deeply concerned. There is emotion there. There's nobody told me she had cancer.
Yeah, he's not completely dead to the world yet.
Yeah, so you kind of you see that humanity still in it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to think about that in the context of a later issue that we'll get to, where you have illustrated how he experiences time. Yes. Because it's not like he's hearing the news about Janie having cancer in his future. He's hearing that she has cancer, and he is still with her.
Yes.
So he is still with her, and I assume still cares about her and is in love with her, and hearing that she's got cancer, and it might be you who did it.
Yes.
So it's got to be a very traumatic thing for him, just in the perspective of how he does not experience time linearly like human beings do.
We get into the next chapter.
Oh, nice.
Because we start seeing a story told everything's at the same time.
Yeah, which is a really fascinating issue.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, Dr. Manhattan does have his little freak out, and instead of teleporting out, he teleports everyone else out, which is really fun.
He's like, y'all need to leave.
And even before that, you get Dan and Lori in the aftermath, and it looks like they had just gotten off the train to the Bone Zone.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's. He kind of looks a little ashamed. She lights a cigarette.
And of course there was nothing like. I guess maybe to people like them, maybe there was something sexual going on with that sort of intense violence.
Because she couldn't even face Hollis after that. She was like, I'm good.
Yeah, I think we're done here. So she goes her separate way. Dan goes to see Hollis, and the news starts raking Dr. Manhattan through the mud. And then we get back to the newsstand guy for a second.
And it's just him kind of summarizing what just happened. And it's once again the exposition of the world. Big thing that comes out of this is Dr. Manhattan not only teleports everybody out, but when he goes back to teleports himself back into his facility in his room, he tells them, hey, I'm leaving, but I'm not just leaving, I'm going to Mars.
Yeah, he quits his government job, swings back to an old carnival to grab a picture, and then leaves the planet.
Yes.
He's gone.
He just says, peace, you guys are too much for me. But the big fallout of this is we get, once again, the news vendor. And the news vendor holds up the paper and it says, Russians invaded Afghanistan. Which now we kind of find out that that Dr. Manhattan was the reason, what was keeping Russia in check.
Yeah.
And so now we're getting this nuclear war threat that's kind of like looming over everybody.
Yeah, things once again escalate because your big deterrent is out of the picture. And then after that, you have Lori getting back to her government area. They no longer care if she's there or not anymore because John is gone. But then you also get like the rising suspicion about John because you have people coming in and bagging up stuff in like radioactive canisters. Because you have that suspicion. Like, is he dangerous just in his presence?
Mm-hmm. And, they kind of even are like, you need to get tested, Lori. Like,
yeah.
20 years. Jeannie was only with him for like 4. But yeah, I mean, you got the exposition. Once again, same set of panels from the whole...
Oh yeah, the rising tension panels, yeah.
You have now, not even John anymore, it's Dr. Manhattan, who is walking along Mars. And then you have...
Tricky Dick,
yeah.
Richard Nixon. Still president for some reason.
They were able to get him a 3rd term.
Yeah.
4th term. He's able to become president indefinite.
Yeah, which is a really interesting piece of history that's really subtly alluded to. It's really nicely done. Because, like, in the wake of victory in Vietnam, he's able to ride that popularity to just having this blank check on running the country.
And which he is. But what's really interesting about these panels is they're giving, like, doomsday scenarios is what they're doing.
Yeah, they're going through possible scenarios like what's the minimum damage that we can allow to happen. And what they basically come down to is that there's no minimum damage. Everything is going on. Yeah, their most optimistic scenario is that they lose the entire eastern seaboard.
Exactly.
And they kind of take that like, oh, okay, yeah, that's in the scheme of things, doesn't seem that bad.
Yeah, right.
But no, the likelihood that it's all going to die.
And during that whole time, we see John/Dr. Manhattan just staring at this picture on Mars by himself. And that's where it ends.
And then we get, I think this might be the last one or the second to last one.
Yeah.
Excerpts from Under the Hood by Hollis Mason. And this is the one where you get like the speculation about the Hooded Justice. Yeah,
we find out what happens to each and every one of them, which I found really sad.
Yeah.
Like, nobody
Yeah,
Nobody
this is
but
the sort of
Hollis.
the sort of dismantling of the Minutemen.
Yeah, the only one that kind of got his happy ending was Hollis at his book. I mean, it is his book, but he goes back to being a mechanic.
Yeah.
You have Hooded Justice, which they feel like was this bodybuilder, weightlifter, circus strong guy who was found dead in a river. And they try to put the connection to the two guys because they both disappeared around the same time. You have Silk Spectre, who who marries her publicist.
Yeah,
And,
who kind of settles.
yeah, has a daughter and will jump at fame at any time, but, she fades off. Silhouette gets killed when they find out she's a lesbian.
Yeah, Silhouette gets murdered.
In
a hate crime.
In a hate crime. Mothman gets locked up in an insane asylum.
Yeah, who was the one who got his cape caught in a rotating door, in a revolving door?
That was Dollar Bill, because he was trying to stop a bank robbery. And, yeah, that happened. As The Incredibles taught us, no capes.
Right. Yes, indeed.
Way ahead of time. But you just kind of start seeing it.
And it's this really interesting way to set up the idea that there is no happy ending.
Yes.